Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Temple of Geek Podcast. My name is Myles Obenza. I am an editor here. If you don't know me, it's because I'm usually writing kind of behind the scenes. The reason we're here today is because October has been insane with releases on games, just nonstop games. And me and Kurosh here, we don't really have the bandwidth to write and cover everything at once. So we decided to do a podcast episode, talk about everything. It's a little bit easier on us. Kurosh, introduce yourself. Who are you? What do you do?
Hi, everyone. My name is Kurosh. As Myles said, I'm one of the video game correspondents at Temple of Geek. I work closely with Myles on all these games that we get to go through in October. And I do a YouTube channel of my own, the KJP Show, where I talk primarily about indie games. But here we're going to be talking about quite a lot, right?
Oh, yeah.
So it's going to be good.
A lot of these are going to be indie games, a lot of good stuff this October. So let's just jump right in. I wanted to start with Metaphor ReFantasia. This is the new IP from Atlus. If you're unfamiliar, they make the Persona games. Awesome, gigantic JRPGs. This is like their first new IP set in a fantasy world. We both got codes, but you're the only one who's really had the time to play. I haven't even started it yet. How long have you been playing for? Your thoughts? Just throw it all out there. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So just to give my prior experience, I have always known about Persona. I've never dived too much into it until Persona 5 had come out. And I spent that game has been one of those games where I keep trying and then I'd be like, no, I got to come back to it. I keep trying to come back to it. I eventually beat that earlier this year, just in time for Metaphor. And right now I'd say I'm sitting at around 25-ish hours playing Metaphor, and I still feel like I'm just kind of hitting the cusp of it, which is par for the course for their type of games. They are lengthy, they are meaty, but it's to their benefit because I think they definitely lean into, and I think it's a strength of theirs, they build a world. Like whatever type of story or premise they're working with, they're creating an atmosphere, they're immersing you in it, they're getting you to not just know the key players, the villain, whoever, you're knowing like the cafe owner, you're learning who these folks are and their lives and their journeys and their struggles. And like I'm sure, like I have no doubt by the end of this game, much like their prior stuff, you just have a vested interest in what everyone's doing. And that's part of that RPG role playing that they really catered to. The combat is very similar, but I will say there's some key differences from what a Persona fan would be familiar with. There's a little bit more leniency into the real time. They blend the turn-based typical JRPG strategy with.
So it's primarily turn-based RPG, like how the old Persona games are. There's no.
Yeah. So if you're familiar with Persona, it's very much still like, hey, there's a calendar system and there's, day-to-day tasks that you're allotted to do. And you go through those and you pick. And so if you pick to do one thing, that means your day is taken from that. And now you have to choose what to do in the evening. These all help you with relationship stats, inventory, dungeon, going into the next dungeon. When you go into the combat areas, which are primarily like the dungeon spaces, you'll run around free like 3D space. But what happens is whenever you initiate a combat with something, you have the opportunity then to go into the typical turn-based RPG style. So you'll have your roster of team and you'll go against them. The thing though that I was saying was the opportunities to get into those encounters, you have, if you're high enough level, if the difference between you and the enemy level wise is large enough, it mitigates that completely, which I think is a positive because one of the things with JRPGs that's like, I think a stigma is how tedious it can get farming. Like,
yeah.
I have to do all these encounters just to level up. Yeah.
You're saying like once you get stronger than like the regular enemies on the field, if you just hit them on the field, you don't re-enter into like a turn-based screen. They're just done for.
Exactly.
Okay, that's good for like 100-hour RPG like this. Like, I don't want to say that respects your time because it's still a 100-hour RPG, but that would definitely make me feel way better about it.
No, but I would say it's still, there is a respect of your time in that 100 hours isn't like a conflated 100 hours. I think there's always been this dialogue lately of like, are games fluffed out just to feel fluffed out? This feels like it's more intentional. Like my time with it is more meaningful as I'm going through and the actions. It's not spent doing tedium. just for the sake of tedium, which I appreciate. Like if a game can do that. Some of the things I really enjoyed, I'd say that the world it builds, like I said, is great. The initial characters you meet have been fantastic. And it plays with, like, just to describe the fantasy, it's in this fantasy world, which is a little different from what they're used to. And you're this race of creatures that is deemed kind of like as a lower class citizen. And you come in and you come in the middle without explaining too much of the story. There's politics at play, there are motives and everything. And I think it handles those in a really interesting way that, like, is very different from something I've seen from Atlus, but at the same time, something I'm like, why haven't they done this before? So it's really cool to see them do that. Have you seen anything in that front? Like, when you initially came into this and were interested as well, did the fantasy aspect of it appeal to you or deter you, or like, how do you feel?
Yes. So just like you, my first experience with like a mainline, I guess you could say, Atlus game was Persona 5 Royal. I played it like last January, and it was like one of the greatest JRPGs I've ever played in my life. And I'm shocked by that because I'm not really like an anime guy. And if you know the Persona games, you know that you always play as like a high school student somewhere in like real world, like Tokyo or wherever. So when they said Metaphor was going to be in like a new like fantasy world, I was really intrigued because I'm a huge like Western RPG nerd. I love like Lord of the Rings and The Witcher. So like that kind of style mixed with the style of RPG that Persona is, like that really spoke to me. So
have you played Fire Emblem Three Houses?
No, I played Engage, which I know isn't really as like high fantasy as Three Houses. No.
The reason I bring up Three Houses is that this game Metaphor gives strong feelings of that, in that it is the fantasy setting, but it's a very mature take on a lot of things. It's handling it with, like, I wouldn't say it's adult, but it's like it's handling it with the weight that you would want out of some things. They're not just like, hey, this is a backdrop, villain who's twirling his mustache. He's doing things by curring to, hey, the people are upset with the inequality in society or something, and you're like, whoa, that's some heavy subject matter. Like, there's something more here. And
I've always felt Persona as a whole kind of tackled like deep issues. So yeah, in Persona 5, the first boss is like a creepy volleyball coach, and like the game handles it in like a kind of mature way despite like the cartoony and jokey backdrop of the game. And so it sounds like Metaphor also does that.
It continues that in the fantasy setting 100%. And like I couldn't get away from talking about Metaphor, and I know it's been said to death, but the music and the UI are so good. I've had it play on repeat, but there's a battle song that plays that it hits bars. It feels like it just hypes you up. Like, no matter what you're doing, it makes everything feel intense. And then the UI, like they're notorious for their level of detail with every visual and graphic and menu option. Still, like they found a way to surpass that in this game as well. So highly recommend it. And the thing that I love, this is the other thing. I was talking to a friend of mine about this, and it was, I think, the perfect way of getting new folks into it as well. Because it's like, you and I, we have a history with them. It's a big ask to say like, hey, buy this game that's like 100+ hours. I think the fact that they're rolling it out with like, hey, you can play the demo. The demos are available for free on the major platforms that this game is available on. And any in the demos are that intro prologue. That intro prologue is about like 8 or 9 hours. And anytime you invest in it, then just transfers over to the save of the main game if you're interested in keep going. I think that like is a big help nowadays where you're like, oh, should I play this demo? I don't know. I got to restart it. I think it makes more sense marketing wise, and I think that should lead to more success for this.
I didn't realize it was 8 to 9 hours. That's insane. That's a huge chunk. But I mean, in the grand scheme of the rest of the game, like that's only 8% of the game. I know recently Atlus has been really trying to push towards like marketing with Xbox, and all their old games are on Game Pass. I believe Persona 3 Reload was day and date on Game Pass. Is Metaphor on Game Pass?
Metaphor is not on Game Pass, from my knowledge. I believe it is available on all platforms, and I got to double check, actually. Now you're making me second guess.
No worries.
but the one thing I will say, I've been playing primarily on PlayStation. PS5 is where I've been playing on. But I remember before the game had come out, I had done the demo for it on my Steam Deck. And it runs really well on Steam Deck. And I think it's perfect for that portable play, whether you're like a PlayStation Portal or a Steam Deck Steam user. Really leans itself into that portable playability of like, hey, I just want to make some progress on my relationships or my skills and stuff. It's definitely that sort of game.
Confirmed not on Game Pass. What are you playing it? You're playing on PS5 or
PS5? Yes.
Okay, right on. And it runs okay.
It runs amazing.
Too demanding, just being like a cartoony-ish style.
It is, but I would say from the frame rate snob side, like it's buttery. Like there's no hitch in like the way the menus transition and the smoothness and everything like that. That is accentuated on the PlayStation when I'm on my big screen or whether I'm on my. I also have a Portal and it runs perfectly on there too. So yeah, that's a lot of my thoughts on Metaphor right now. I'm excited to keep going with it.
Two more quick things before we move on. So how much of like the Persona formula, like the gameplay loop where it's because it uses like the real-time
calendar system, right? Yeah.
How much of it is it like Persona 3 or 5 or whatever, where it's like you spend a week like going through town, links, blah blah blah, and then it's like one day you go fight. Is it pretty much like that as well?
It is mostly. I will say two things. One, it is still very much a calendar system. It is very clear about, okay, this next big milestone is coming on a set date. You need to make sure you do whatever you want to do by that date. The other thing, though, I'll say to that is I think for fans that know the Persona franchise, it can be done sometimes to go through a dungeon in a single day. I find it very difficult in the experience I've had to do that with this. It is very expansive, the dungeon space that they have. And I was like, I'll do it in a single day. I'm like, there's a couple reasons why, which I don't want to spoil, but there are mechanics at play that make you be like, oh, it warrants me going back to the regular out of the dungeon to do other stat stuff, come back and do that. But it is very much more expansive too. That is the other aspect. The other thing I want to say is Persona always had kind of like this thing of Pokemon-esque things where the personas were your different abilities that you could get along the way with different move sets and stats that it kind of elements that it leans towards. This goes in a different direction with its archetypes.
This was my next question.
Perfect. Okay, go, yeah, go for it.
No, this is perfect.
So the archetypes are cool. I like it a lot. There's a lot of games that do like a job class system, and I think it blends that with what this is really going for. It's like you'll have one character built out to be a healer, you level them up in healing, and then you want to switch them to a tank class, but you could then spend points to inherit abilities from the healing class so that they carry that over. And you can just keep doing that with different crossing combinations. There's a lot of variants that I think you could expand your team into. So you'd be like, you could have your main guy primarily deal with something while in one dungeon, whereas three bosses later, three days later, you want to be like, no, that wasn't working. Later in this dungeon, I need to really switch that up, and I need him to be my tank. While my other two, I've invested these skills. It'll cross better here. And it's really cool. So that is a difference. That is something that I like, that they're trying something a little different here with that.
That's another thing I was really interested in, because games like Bravely or Octopath, where it's like jobs and classes are like the meat of like your battle strategy. That's another thing that really interests me about Metaphor. So.
And it's that it's not that just that there are jobs and classes. It's that you could have like a character is not tied to a specific job or class.
Yeah. So there's not like an obvious like she needs to be a healer, he has to be a tank. It's really just based on like your preferences.
Exactly. And I like that. I like that because it lets me then be like, okay, what's my team comp stat wise and skill wise? I can have that whichever. It's almost like transmog in some ways of like I can have that be on whoever I want them to be because I like their relationships with my characters.
When you first get a party member, are there stats allocated all equally, or is there like he has higher attack, he has higher magic, whatever. Like, is that really how it is? Or
No, that's a good thing you brought up. When it does, it has everyone leveling up, and so you'll level up your archetypes that you have them on, and you level up that individual as a whole as well, and they have set stat points. For the main protagonist that you play as, you can choose. There is some automatic stat allocation, but you also get some agency in choosing where there's like an additional stat point that gets to be allocated at your discretion. For your other party members, that is not an option. It's just auto stat allocation, and that's it. Yeah.
Well, I just want to ask about this game all day. With they're called archetypes here, right? With the archetypes. So in Persona games, the main character is the only one that can use multiple personas, whereas your party is stuck with one. For the archetypes here, can anyone switch at any? Or no, that's just what she said. Duh.
Yeah. So I initially thought it was that case too, where it was just going to be, oh, this is just going to apply to my main character. But as I was going through the system, it's like, no. Right now, I have a tank. I have my main guy who I've opted to be the healer primarily, and I've taken some other skills to make him passive. And then my other guy, I've been swapping between very physical attacker or very elemental magical attacker. And I will say I would emphasize ranking up the magic early, because there is some economy at play with the game of like, and your MP as you go through dungeons, it doesn't regenerate. And there's very few resources, so there are skills associated to the magic class that help with that. And I kind of wish I was like, damn, I wish I knew that going in.
Luckily, you probably have another 80 hours to just respec your character.
Yeah, it's not an issue going forward. Yeah. It's more what I would advise to, like, oh, if you're just coming in, this is some advice that would help.
That's good to know for me. Okay. Just very, very quick, very casual. Score this game out of 5. What do you give Metaphor ReFantasia?
Quick. That's quick. I would say
very arbitrary.
At this time, it's just
just go, just quick.
I gotta say 5. I was trying to think of, like, there's a little bit of some stuff that I thought would hold it back, but they're minor gripes, and so I wouldn't really hold anything against it. It does everything it sets out to do. And so it is a 5 out of 5 on my verdict.
Okay. Last time, before we move on from Metaphor, what are your minor gripes? Quick rapid fire.
The minor gripes are just like little tedium of some of the allocation. Like when you're going in through the city, there's a few little moments where it just doesn't clearly indicate like where you're at versus where you need to go. So again, it's just like little moments that, like, in a couple of other things similar to that, where I'm just like, I don't know what this is. I'm kind of caught. But after a little bit of recalibrating, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm set. The challenge is good, and I think that there's no issue there. Yeah, it's primarily just like the menu. Like, there is a lot of menus and there's a lot of things to absorb. Sometimes it can be a little disorienting for someone uninitiated.
Maybe a high learning curve then.
Yeah, that's probably a good. That's definitely like. And this is, again, coming from someone who has experience with their prior games. I think for someone brand new to the franchise, that would be even more. So,
for sure. Awesome. 5 out of 5, Metaphor ReFantasia. I can't wait to play it. That's the next game. Once we're done with all of these, I've been playing a bunch of smaller indies, getting ready for this podcast. One of those games is Neva from the Meta Studio. This is the follow-up to Gree. I don't really know how to say it. I believe that was released in 2018. If you're familiar with Gree, it's just like a beautiful 2D platformer with like pastel art and gorgeous music. Short, quick, like 3 sessions and you're done. I believe you played Neva as well. Yes. I just finished it like 2 hours ago.
Man, I don't know how your eyes haven't swollen up. I was a wreck when I finished it.
So that's something I wanted to mention. It's like it's so poignant and so emotional, despite like there's no dialogue and it doesn't like explicitly explain any story, but you can get what they're going for. I know what they're going for because I have the review guide and they kind of spelled it out for me, but
It kind of went into it blind, and
Yeah.
I think it was still very clear for what it was going for. Right out the outset, it does a good job of kind of explaining the immediate dangers or concerns that are on your plate.
Yeah.
And then you kind of go from there. But like, what grabbed you like initially when you first played it? Like, what was the first thing that went through your head?
The one thing I was very happy with this compared to Grease is that like there's combat. Like you have a sword, and you there's like a dodge, and like you can do some basic combos or whatever. I think, again, just like with Grease, the main thing that got me was the art style and the music. Just beautiful, like very, very artistic game. You can tell there's a lot of passion in it.
Yeah.
I had a gripe for like the first like 3 chapters where like it felt like too easy. Like yeah, I get it. It's like an artistic platforming, but it just kind of felt like, I don't want to say the word boring, but like it just didn't grab me. But then you get into the winter chapter, and like, oh my God, it changed my mind just immediately. So in the winter chapters, which is like basically the end game. So let me preface with like a lot of the platforming is also like puzzle solving too, which in the chapters prior to the winter chapter is just, again, basic and bare bones. There's this part where you're walking on like a frozen lake, and your reflection is underneath you, and you have to try to like jump on these platforms that you can't see on your side, but you can see in the reflection. It's so well designed. It's beautiful. It's not that hard, but it's like it's beautiful, and it's really intuitive. And then
it's very creative. I thought I wanted, when I got to those sections, I definitely felt the want of, can we get some more of this? But by that time, I felt like it had already come to it was nearing its closure. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah. So like the game as a whole is maybe like 5 hours, 6 if you want 100% get all the collectible flowers and birds, I think, or whatever. But like, it didn't feel rushed, and it definitely didn't outstay its welcome. I think it's paced perfectly for this, 5-hour experience.
Absolutely, yeah. It was the way the combat was. I wasn't aware. I hadn't played their Nomada's prior game, so now I'm very inclined to give it a shot. This was very much like I've heard so much about the studio, and the subject matter gave me strong like Princess Mononoke vibes.
100%, yes.
And very much doing its own thing. And like I think I filled my PS5 hard drive with screenshots and videos, because every time there's a point in the game, several times where you're just running across the map, and like it's a different season and stuff. Each one was like, man, this is like a moving painting.
Yeah.
I just wanted to like sit in this and take it in, and it was beautiful. But the combat was really good. Like I was really impressed for a studio that had no prior experience doing something in a mechanic such as combat in their games. To have implemented it so intentionally. Like there was a lot of like in some of the later encounters, I was like rolling, dodging here, doing an ability there. It felt artful. Like it made me just like a lot
too. It's like I like the platforming and the puzzles are, whatever. It's not hard at all. But some of the combat was actually, I was like this is it was actually hard.
I hated the enemies at that point. I was like, okay, you're giving me a reason why you're a jerk.
But exactly. I think that lends itself more to like its quality too, though. Like it's not just like you're not just swiping at things just for the sake of doing it. It's like there's an actual challenge there. And the final boss, I'm not going to spoil anything, but like that fight, it's broken up into 2 phases.
Thank God.
It's so cool, dude. Oh yeah, and thank God, because like it's a little frustrating, but it's beautiful. It
was really beautiful.
Good.
I agree.
Really
the other thing too, I was trying to rationalize it like story wise. I was like, every time a fight incurred, and I'm not talking about that fight in particular, just like different just encounters throughout the game. I would die a lot just because I would mismatch certain things. But I was also like, oh, this plays into what the character, because the character is very passionately defending, who they loved. And I was like, I would be reckless too, probably. Like if I was in the heat of, no, don't stay away from Neva and all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to lean into like, I get reckless and I'm a hothead protecting my partner.
So yeah, this game, really speaks to me. Like it's about like protecting nature and like losing loved ones, and it's and not a single word is spoken throughout the whole game unless you call for
pet.
Neva. Yeah, and yes, if you're a dog lover, A, yes, you can pet the dog, and B, like just bring your tissues.
Bring your tissues.
It's a very emotional game. Yeah,
very emotional. It very much spoke to me too. It's one of my favorite this year, honestly.
yeah.
It spoke to me on the same tones and themes you talked about, but also just like the cycle of life and like how it is and how it spreads and how what our investment in that is and what our place and all those things are. Like I was like, wow, it's so wild. Like in such a short time, you can say so much. Like in the time frame that they allotted for this game, not a single moment, like you said, was wasted. I'm like, wow, bravo.
Yep,
good stuff. What's your verdict for this?
Just off the top, I'd probably say 4 out of 5. I can't get behind this has nothing to do with like the design of the game. I can't get behind the price tag of a game this short. That's one thing that's like holding me back. I believe it's either $20 or $25.
It's about 20.
Okay. Yeah, 4 out of 5, just based on quality, the way it made me feel, how like responsive and intuitive the controls are. 4 out of 5 for me. How about you?
For me, I think it was a 5 out of 5. Like I started the game, I ended the game. I was a wreck after the game ended. Like I have a cat, and like she was in my lap the whole time, and I just was like, "Come here!" Like I just want to hold you. Yeah. And like for me, like if a game moves me that way, I feel like that I read into that, and I'm like, that was a beautiful sign. It's all the moments of it just stuck. I'm excited. I'm very excited to see what the studio does going forward.
Same.
If they've jumped from that to this, and like, do you think they would revisit this space, or do you think they would go into like a new story? Or
well, I think they're going to stick with what they're doing, because Grease was like, it had very similar art style and like platforming. I think from Neva, from here, I think they want to stick with that style, maybe iterate more, maybe make it a bit longer, maybe add more mechanics and stuff.
Yeah. I meant more so. Do you think they're going to stay in the worlds of either Gree or Neva, or do you think they're going to do a new kind of tale or story with another set of characters?
Gotcha. I think their MO now at this point is just a whole brand new world. Yeah. I wanted to touch on one more thing that.
Yeah.
The fact that this 5-6 hour experience had such like a profound emotional effect on you.
Yeah.
This is the perfect game to show folks who don't really play games, who don't really understand like the type of art that it can be. Because there's still a lot of people who are like, oh, games, you're just playing Fortnite or Mario, blah, blah, blah. Like there's so many people who don't understand like the passion and the art that go into like a game like this that has like deep emotional resonance with people. So that's another thing that I think Neva.
Yeah, no, I think there's a strong message here with that. 100%. I agree with you. Okay.
You have been playing Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. So I played this a little bit at Summer Game Fest.
Okay.
I'm a casual fighting game fan and an even more casual Dragon Ball fan. So I didn't know how to play it. And like, I knew who like half the characters were. I was just there. Like I didn't know what was happening. What I do know is that like, it's sort of like a Dragon Ball Z what if, where you can kind of change scenarios to like alternate the history of what happened in the anime. How wrong am I? What are your thoughts on this game?
It is that, as well as it's like, I want to just speak to from a Dragon Ball fan. I've loved it since the Toonami days when Tom would come on and be like, "Hey fans," and do the whole. They actually got Tom from the Toonami voice to do one of the commercials for this game.
Oh, awesome!
And it was like they were like, "Okay, you know your audience, you know what you're going for. This is amazing. Like, I'm excited. I was looking forward to this coming out." And so the title doesn't fully articulate this, but if there was a series of these games, and this is the next in that series of the Budokai Tenkaichi games, which are those 3D space fighting games that they've done in the past. With this one, they have all of like within the Dragon Ball Z lore and world, not even Dragon Ball Z and Super major plot points and stories, it has all the major fights that occur from that time through to Super. So you have Greece, you have what's his name? I forget the cat man, the cat god, but I forget his name. But that you have Piccolo, you have Cell Saga, you have Boo Saga, you have the stuff from some of the movies, you have the Broly movie. And each of these, there's a series of fights that it's like, these are the iconic fights from those stories, those arcs. Now, where it differs and what you're alluding to is if you do certain conditions in these fights, you can alter those timelines to be slightly different. So, for instance, with the initial like arc with like that lead up to not Frieza, with Vegeta and Nappa arriving onto the Earth and facing off against Goku and team. Earlier, Goku faces his brother. And there's a moment in that story, spoilers for folks that from like 20 plus years ago.
Yeah, that's
still
fine.
still spoilers, just in case. There's a moment in that story where Goku holds Raditz, and in order for Piccolo to do a move and it would require him to shoot both of them. So it takes Goku out. He has to be resurrected. If you choose to do that, there's a point in the game where you can choose to do that fight without having Piccolo help. And if you do that, the story gets altered. And things unfold in that arc differently. So that's one of the more direct ones where it's like, how do you choose? Do you want him to help or not? There are other ones where I think it's really cool where it's like, it becomes a game of figuring out what the condition is to make the fight alter. To be like if you can beat Raditz earlier on, or if you can beat Frieza without doing something, then it like unlocks it. And so I think that adds to the fun, because on one hand, you could just be like, here's me revisiting all these great moments in this franchise. On the other hand, you could be like, I want to see what could be with these storylines.
That was my first main question is like, are you just playing through to the end of this scenario and like seeing like the alternate ending and then that's it? You just move on to the next one? Or is there like a campaign mode where you're playing through the whole story of the anime and then the alternate history has branching like endings and stuff in like the main story? Or is that not?
I wouldn't say there's one campaign. There is just many, because like you said, there's just over 120 characters that are playable in this game. That's both true in the multiplayer as well as in the single player. The single player has you be like, let's do Goku's just initial arc that goes from him facing his brother all the way to Frieza, and then that ends. Then it's like, okay, let's do the Cell Saga, and let's do it from the point of view of Gohan. So you play as Gohan. Let's do this other arc where you take it from Vegeta's point of view. Let's do it from Cell. Like each one iterates on it, so you have all these different like mini campaigns, so to speak, like you're playing these single player things, but you're doing it from the perspective of these different characters. Right. So you can choose which one. After you do a little bit of the first one, you can back out to the main menu and it's like, oh, now you can just do any of them. Like I did a little bit of the Goku one and I was like, I'm Vegeta's kicking my butt a lot with when he was great ape Vegeta, which you got memed to hell. He was hard. I'm not gonna lie.
I heard a couple of things. I remember you talking about it in Slack, just like this thing is absolute BS.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's challenging. The difficulty can be adjusted, which is great. I like that option. It's still like the controls, they offer a classic control and they offer like a modified. I personally preferred the modified because it just made everything feel more intuitive. And certain things just automatically will happen. And there's more accessibility options in the deeper you'd like to go, which I'm always a fan of. So that's like the main stuff. No, good. That was the main stuff for the campaign.
That's the issue I had during my SGF preview was like, the controls did not seem intuitive at all. I believe I was playing on the classic controls and I couldn't figure out how to fly in the right direction. It was a little frustrating as somebody.
I generally feel like one of the criticisms I have with this game is it's a steep learning curve, because even though there's a tutorial, it's very bare bones and you don't necessarily know how that would apply then. Like you have your static and enemy. You don't know how to chain them all together to feel like a Saiyan, to feel like a badass, to feel like some super cool character in the game. And making a few adjustments after I learned a little bit of that and going through trial and error helped. But I still see the ceiling as super high with seeing clips of people playing on ranked or on multiplayer. And I'm like, they're playing on another. I genuinely feel like their level's over 9,000.
Yeah. So I'm glad you bring up ranked in multiplayer. That was my next question. So it sounds like from like a lore perspective or like a fan of the story perspective, like this is a game that person is going to want to play. And the Dragon Ball games historically have been kind of competitive FGC, like big games. Do you see this kind of taking that role ever?
I think that, what was it, Dragon Ball Fighter Z, the 2D like assist one, that was the pinnacle, and I think this has matched it, if not exceeded it potentially. And in it just genuinely feels like a true DBZ experience. I think what they were aiming for with the earlier parts in the Budokai series aspired to that. I think now it feels fully like they're now seeing it to full definition of what it could be. And if you can play at that high competitive level, I would love to see this at like an Evo or something. I think it has all the. I think it has all the check marks to potentially be that.
That's awesome.
I don't know what the meta is, so I'm not well versed in that side of it. Of like, is it broken? Is it patchable? Is there things that just limit it from that? But I think if it was just straight like, hey, pick your fighter, run matches, run it back, go through the brackets, that makes sense to me. I think it's very possible. I would love to that right now the multiplayer you can set up tournaments, and Dragon Ball Z is known for setting up tournaments in lore. I would love for there to be a spectator mode, because it's lacking that, I think. Unless you're an active participant in a tournament, you can't view another player's match.
That's weird. I feel like that's a really big omission for a modern day fighting game. Like I feel like pretty much every game has that. That's really weird.
Yeah, I don't know if it was maybe in their wheelhouse of like what they wanted. They do so many branching timelines and so many characters that I'm like, I can see how they missed it, but I hope that like they're adding DLC to this game. I hope that's something they add as a feature for, hey, we want to now expand the multiplayer more. Let's really cater to what people in that audience would want. And it's like, hey, we want to watch it. We want to set it up, get something going. I've already seen a couple of my friends be like, hey, let's get a tournament going this weekend. Fill this bracket up. Let's go. That kind of thing. I am not well-versed enough to be like, I don't want to contend. But again, I wanted to watch, and I'm like, oh, I can't watch.
So you haven't experienced the online yourself yet?
I've done a little bit. I've done 1 or 2 matches, but it was enough to tell me like I need to practice. I need to go back in the hyperbolic time chamber. But
perfect.
100%.
Was it responsive? Was it laggy? I mean, I guess at the end of the day, it's based on your connection, but.
True, but I will say when I tried it during the initial weekend that it had just been coming out to everyone, so it should be at its peak. Load times or search times were low, and experience, it wasn't noticeable to me, I would say, for like any kind of lag or drop off. But I wasn't playing at a level that I think I would notice.
Sure.
Because there are a lot of things where you're doing dodges, you're doing parries, you're countering a counter to set up a charge, and it's like, I'm not at that level, so I'm like, I don't know what I missed.
Yeah, for sure. So you're not much of like an FGC like crazy fan, like you're not playing like Street Fighter or Tekken all the time, anything like that?
I play them. I mean, I'm a big MVC2 fan, and I've done I did the review for us for that, and I have a history with that game. But I'm always like I'm an enthusiast, and I enjoy watching it. And I like competing in my circle of friends, but I'm never like, I'm not going to a local tournament with public.
I'm really good at when I'm playing against my brother, but if I'm not playing locals or anything. Me and Matthew Forcione here at Temple of Geek, we reviewed Street Fighter 6 last year in June when it came out, and I had never really been into like Street Fighter game before, or like really tried to play, and I think I got okay at it. I mained Cammy, and so like I felt like I got like the basics of like a fighting game down. And I tried to apply that knowledge to Sparking Zero, and it did not. It did not. But I think most of that's just because it's 3D versus 2D.
Yeah, it's a very different style, I think. Like, it takes a different like way of thinking when you play a 3D game versus a 2D one. Mm-hmm. And I definitely lean more towards the 2D myself. But you also said you're kind of like on the Dragon Ball fan base, like on the more casual side.
Extremely casual. Like very casual.
So when you were playing, did any of that like register, or did you feel like you were able to get into it, or did it interest you to want to learn more?
So I've always been interested in rewatching the show, but probably the abridged version, of course. Like, I'm aware of like when, spoilers of course for 20-year-old anime, I'm aware of when Gohan kills Cell and when Piccolo has to shoot through them both. Like, I'm aware of like these like popular story beats. Yes, it did make me very curious to play and like learn it, because like it from my bad experience, and the only reason it was a bad experience is because I didn't know how to play it. I am very curious about it. It's not something I could see myself going to like on purpose or like paying for. It was very interesting. The animations were great. The sound was really, really good sound. Like the music and the effects, everything was really well designed.
Okay.
If I get a code, if I have friends who are like, hey, Myles, you want to play? Sure. But I don't think it's something I'm going to go after. Not because I think it's bad. It's just not quite my wheelhouse.
Yeah, for me, it's less of interest for multiplayer personally. I think this is a great, it speaks the most to and resonates the most with someone who's a fan of the series and wants to kind of rekindle and remember those moments, but also see like cool what ifs.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
That is the target audience for this. I think if you're Dragon Ball curious, it could help spark that curiosity. Yeah. But I don't think, if you're coming in with no knowledge whatsoever and you don't know the Dragon Ball world and you want this to be your first, I don't know if I would recommend that.
Okay.
I feel like if you're curious and you're willing to do some of the legwork and watch some of the stuff in tandem with it, it would work. Anything less than that, it'd be a harder sell. But it is fun. It is very fun once you get in the midst of it and goof around with it and everything. So
yeah. Okay, before we move on to the next game, score out of 5.
I give it a solid 4 out of 5. I think for what it's doing, it's a very robust, it's polished, like no bugs, no whatsoever. It runs well. It's very in depth and offers a lot of features. There are the 4 is because there are certain features that I think hold it from being that pinnacle Super Saiyan 5 out of 5. I think that it has some room, and I'm curious to see where they go with DLC and maybe optimizations to maybe get there later. But at this time, I think it's a solid 4 out of 5.
Awesome. That's a good score. That's really good score. That's what I'm saying. Like, that's the thing about this October is like every game we're talking about, like we've just talked about 3 so far, and they're all like high quality games, and like we're only talking about like 8 games today, and they're all like quality.
Only 8.
Imagine all the other games that we did not have time for, and that's just in October. And a week from now, Dragon Age is out. Like we're screwed.
Dragon Age is out. Black Ops 6 is out. Sonic and Shadow is out.
Oh, man. It's just
we gotta go. We gotta go fast.
Yeah. Okay. So this next one I'm gonna skip. We can talk about it at the end if there's time.
Sure.
Cool. So we're gonna move on to the Silent Hill 2 remake. So
yes.
I played this. You did not. I did not get a code for it, so I just kind of bought it and played it on my time. It came out on my birthday, October 8th. So that was a good birthday present for me.
Happy birthday!
Thank you. So I love horror games, but I'm primarily like a Resident Evil fan. I've never played a Silent Hill game. And so but I've always been aware of like, it's like space in the zeitgeist. I understand it's important. It's one of the best horror games ever made. Silent Hill 2 remake, and shout out to Bloober Team. They made the Medium back in like 2020 when like the next gen started. Mm-hmm. This is probably the best survival horror game I have ever played in my life.
Really? Wow.
Probably the best survival horror game I've ever played in my life. It is incredible.
That's a statement.
It's so good, dude.
What I guess when you first jumped into it, what like gave you that initial like, oh, we're playing a game now. We're in it. What was it for you?
It did take a couple hours for like that kind of feeling to click, but once I got used to like you can dodge and you have like a freaking pipe and you're just like smashing fools with it, and then you eventually get guns. Like all the combat felt really good. if you're a horror fan, you know, like pinnacles of horror are like environmental storytelling, dark lighting, like claustrophobic environments, like all that stuff like adds up to be great horror. This game has it like just across the board, just flawless. One thing I don't love, and you've probably seen memes about this, is this: when you're exploring the actual town itself, the fog is so dense, and I'm not even exaggerating. You can't even see like 2 feet. Like,
okay,
and like I understand that they're going for like atmosphere and immersion, but like in terms of exploration, like, yes, you do have a map, and the map is one of the things that's like extremely well done, in that, like, say you come across like a locked door, when you walk away, he'll mark it down on the map like, oh, this is locked, and then once you eventually get the key for it, he'll write down on the map again like, okay, I can open this door.
Okay.
Having that map helps, but then like, because of the fog, you're always opening up the map. Like,
Okay.
At the end of the game, it reveals all of your stats. I opened my map like 1,200 times.
It keeps track of that stat?
Yeah. It's insane.
Okay. I guess this is something I needed to ask you earlier. How long have you been playing this game, and have you beaten it?
I beat it a few days ago, and I think I beat it at like 24 or 25 hours.
Okay. Solid.
I'd say maybe an hour or two of that is checking locked doors, and there's doors that are like they're like placed in the environment like very deliberately. At least it feels that way, but then it doesn't lead anywhere. But you can still like open it, and there's like an animation to check it. And so I did feel like that was a little bit annoying, like always having to check a door.
Yeah.
But once you learn like the design philosophy of the game, like maybe 5-6 hours in, like it doesn't become as annoying, because the level designs when you're like in, for example, when you're in the hospital, it has those doors where you're like, I think I can go here, but I can't. But if you if this is where it's like a good and a bad thing, where all you have to do is check the map, and you can see like where you have to go. But like I wasted a lot of time going to like a spot that looks like it's important, but it's like not actually. But
okay,
small
it's exploration.
Yeah.
I wonder how many of those hours were the map opening and closing.
Yeah, probably an hour. 1,200 times I opened it. Yeah, so having never played it, the story was new to me. Yeah.
Was it hard to follow as a result, or were you able to pick? Are they? I guess this is me not knowing the Silent Hill franchise. From what you've been able to gather, is Silent Hill 2 just its own experience, much like a Final Fantasy is like 1 and 2 have nothing to do with each other?
Yeah, from what I can gather as well, yes. I believe there's like small references to past games in the later games, but I don't think there's any there's no like overt sequels as far as I know. Fans, if you know, please let me know in the comments, because this is my first Silent Hill game.
I had another question too. This being a remake, and we just got. Final Fantasy VII's been doing the remake, but they're kind of taking a different direction with what a remake means. Were you able to, or do you know to what degree this is a remake? Is it a polish of the original one, or do you know if they've added things that may not have been in the original one?
That is a great question. So there's a couple ways. There's a couple points I need to knock down to answer it.
Okay.
The original was fixed camera tank controls.
Oh, those bad boys.
Like Resident Evil. So now with this, it's over the shoulder, third person, way more accessible than the fixed camera tank controls. I like those, but like newer gamers now who didn't really grow up with that, they're not going to like it at all. And then another thing is that there's collectible that you find throughout the game. I honestly forget what they're called. I think they're just called like memories or something, but you find it, and it's a callback to a moment that happens in the original game.
Oh.
Yeah. So it's still like kind of, it's like a meta nod, like, this is how we're going to handle this moment in 2024, but this collectible is still a nod for the fans of the old game who are like, I wonder if they're gonna handle it the same way now or not. But yeah, it's very from the ground up. It's very new, exactly like how Resident Evil 2 was as well.
Do you feel like this is enticing you, being a horror fan and enjoying this one so much, to explore the other Silent Hills? Or do you want to see that similar treatment for Silent Hill 2 remake on those other ones to bring them into the forefront with the polish this one got?
I would love to go back and play them. The only thing holding me back is time. Retro horror, which we'll get into with the next game, I'm a huge fan of, and so I would love to go back and re-experience them. Remaking the other games, I know just last week, Bloober Team announced new IP. It's called Chronos. I believe it's like a...
yeah, I saw some of that.
Yeah, it's like a time travel survival horror. So if Konami, if it's in their cards for them, I would love for Bloober Team to make them again. But I don't think it's going to be for a while. Of course, I would love it. There's a lot of people online who like are very anti-remake. I don't really understand that because it's a way for fans like me to experience this game for the first time, and it's more accessible than the original. I don't even know where you could play the original.
Exactly. I think that's another aspect of it, is like the historical preservation of these things. Like, how is it accessible in today's day and age if you don't have the thing that is like on eBay for $20,000 potentially? Oh, you don't have that? All right, then I don't have any legal ways to really, easily access to get this and play. But you brought up a good point. Like, remakes are one direction, but do you think this might have been them, to Konami and Bloober, really testing the ground and be like, hey, we should go forward and do maybe a new Silent Hill? Do you see that?
There's a couple of projects already announced. I forget what they're called, but they've released one this year called Silent Hill Short Message, where it's like a free-to-play, like, hour-long kind of hallway thing, similar to Kojima's. And then they are making one, again, I don't remember the names, but they're making a new Silent Hill that's going to be set in Japan, and then just another one. Just, that's it. So it is happening, but we don't have any more details. Hopefully at the Game Awards or something.
Ooh, that'd be cool. Yeah, I'd like to hear that.
And they are doing a third film, which I don't believe they've released a trailer, but like everything's confirmed. And
that's exciting.
Konami as a whole, I feel like they're slowly getting back into like loving their IPs again, because we have
that'd be nice.
Yeah. Because we have there's the Snake Eater remake coming. Yeah. This year we had the Castlevania Dominus collection, which was insane. Like, I would love for them to bring all of their IPs back in like a huge way. Silent Hill, it is happening. I just don't remember the names of them.
Sure. Okay. That's exciting to hear.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts with the game?
I wanted to touch on the story just a bit. So it's a psychological horror game. So it's like, when you talk to other characters, like the word that kept coming to my mind was lucid. It didn't feel lucid. It felt very like when you're high or drunk. It just felt very like whimsical. It didn't feel lucid, and I think that helped with the story. And then if you know anything about the story, like the protagonist James, he is not a good dude at all. He is like an awful person. Like, a lot of the enemies you fight are like metaphors for like his violence against women and like his psychosexual like issues he has. Like, it tells a very interesting story about like the kind of monsters regular seeming people can be.
That gives me strong like Stephen King vibes.
Yeah, 100%.
In a big way.
yeah, definitely. And then like the monsters felt very Cronenberg, like, where they're like very body horror, very gross, like just all around is very good game. Very good.
Wow, game. Nice. That's big raves. Would you say there's any like a score you're thinking off the top of your head?
I think I think it's another 4 out of 5.
Man, October's killing
it's so good, man. It's so good. Do you have plans to check this out? Are you a horror fan at all?
I can do horror. I don't know if I can do a lot of it.
Sure.
I've tried a few, and like the games that I feel like the controls are less like, hey, you're in combat with them, where it's a lot of evasion. I don't feel good. Like I remember levels of Dead Space where it's like, you can't beat this guy, you have to run. I'm like, I am not having fun.
So I wouldn't say the combat here is like Dead Space level. There is definitely a small learning curve, but like the enemies that you fight, there's only like 3 types, and you fight them throughout the whole game. And so
there is combat. It isn't like I always associate Silent Hill with you don't fight anything, you're just running or hiding.
It's probably best to do those things in survival horror games, except for like Resident Evil, where they're like action games now. It's best to like not fight, because your handgun ammo is very few and far between. All your healing items are very few and far between. But you can learn the enemy patterns here like very quickly, and then you don't have to use your gun like, throughout the whole game, because you have that pipe. You can just
melee.
You can just melee the whole game.
Okay. I think, for me, survival and stealth are things that have just never... It always induces more anxiety for me than it does joy or excitement. And I haven't really clicked with them. So when you're talking about like a Resident Evil 4 or 5, where it is more of a... It's almost like the Aliens to Alien. Of like, it is more on the action James Cameron side of things, as opposed to the Ridley Scott or the Stephen King side of things. I feel as a game that I do better. Granted, when there's a game like what's it called, Limbo or Inside, I think eerie horror, or like I think even Alan Wake to some degree, or Control gets eerie a little bit. I can do those where it's like tonally some stuff, but throw me into a Doom or a Dead Space, not a Silent Hill person.
For sure. Yeah, 4 out of 5 for me. It's great. It's like my number 2 of the year after Astrobot.
Oh, okay.
That's just because I haven't played Metaphor yet, so we'll see.
Gotcha. Yeah. Just they should put the map down. That's what they should have put the map down for.
Just go easy on the fog. That's it, man. Okay, we're gonna stick with spooky games here, just because we're a week away from Halloween. A little indie darling. I wrote a written review on this at TempleofGeek.com. Fear the Spotlight. So this game is awesome. I scored it in my written review 4 out of 5. It's the first game published under Blumhouse Games. If you don't know who they are, they're like huge in the horror film scene. They've done like Paranormal Activity. They did the adaptation of Five Nights at Freddy's. I believe they did Black Phone, the one with Ethan Hawke.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so they're just known for horror, and I guess they decided to get into the game space. When they announced that, GF, I was a little skeptical. I was like, oh, it's just another like money grab. They're going to pump out bad horror games all the time, blah, blah, blah. That is not the case. That is not the case at all.
Can you describe a little bit like what it is to me? Like I just know it from a title. Like yes. what is Fear the Spotlight?
So it's just another kind of third person over the shoulder survival horror game. This is very entry level and like designed for gamers who have never played a horror game or who were like too scared. There's no combat and there's no jump scares. Yeah,
sign me up.
It's perfect. and it's only like 5-6 hours. Like it's perfect. Yeah, so you play as 2 teenage girls. You break into your high school and perform a seance, and then from there everything just kind of goes to crap. Okay. And it's made in this very like retro PS1 style art style.
Okay,
it's beautiful. Like it works. If you've played Crow Country, which has...
Yeah, I was about to ask if it's anything like that, because that felt like it captured that old style,
yes,
but with like a nice texture polish to it.
Yep, yeah.
So it's the same nice.
Yep. Again, no combat, no jump scares, but it's still like really scary. So the reason why it's called Fear the Spotlight is throughout the whole game you have to avoid this like spotlight monster man. It's just a guy, but he has like a rusty spotlight as a head, and then if you get caught in the light, then he like whisks you toward him and he like shakes you, and it's terrifying. That's not like an auto kill, so like you'll be able to run away and stuff. But I think you can only get caught like 2 or 3 times and then you die. Dying is pretty forgivable. You just like start back at a checkpoint that's maybe 2-3 minutes behind you. It's very entry level, very, very, very like made for newcomers. Go ahead.
Where'd you play this on?
Oh, I played this on Switch.
On Switch? So how is it on mobile then, or on portable? Or did you play it docked, play portably?
I played it mostly portable. I think the fact that it's that retro style graphics really lends itself well to portable. So if you have a Steam Deck or if you have a portal, like definitely play it. You're a Switch, of course. Yeah, and what's even more impressive is it was fully made by 2 people. So the developers, Cozy Game Pals, they're a husband and wife team. I believe they worked in games prior. One of them came from Naughty Dog, and then I think one of them worked in animation, if I remember correctly. And this is their first project, and they just nailed it, hit it out of the park. I think in my written review I said it was like Silent Hill light, because they had a lot of aspects that felt the same, and like not in a derivative way, but in like a really inspired way. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, if you're looking for like a retro horror indie game, if you've never really been into horror games, fear the spotlight. Like definitely play it. 4 out of 5. Definitely.
Available now.
It's out now. Yes, all of these are out now. Yeah. I believe.
All of the
everything is out now. Yes.
Okay. Cool. Would recommend 4 out of 4 you said 5 to 6 hours long?
5 to 6 hours long. Yes. Oh, I want to mention I'm allowed to say that the game is like divided into 2 chapters. The second chapter is terrifying. It's actually scary. Whereas like the first half, it just felt like a proof of concept of like what the game has to offer. I was like, cool, whatever. And then you start the second chapter, and it's actually like it's scary, and it's so good. It's so good.
Nice. That's high praise.
Yeah.
Fear the spotlight. Nice.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we do have a couple of minutes. I want to go back to the one we skipped earlier. You are playing Diablo 4 Vessel of Hatred, the expansion that also came out, I believe, October 8th. I'm not playing this at all. I don't really think I have plans to. I like Diablo 4. I played the most recent season, which I believe was 5, for a couple hours, and it's great. Tell me about Vessel of Hatred.
Vessel of Hatred is the story of Diablo 4 kind of continues. You go to a new region. You follow one of the characters of the events that end with Diablo 4's main campaign, and where they decide to take things with the story. And it just kind of narratively it opens up from there. With the DLC and the expansion, I should say, they time these with the seasons, and so sometimes it's hard to differentiate what they're adding with the season versus what they're adding with the expansion of the game. With this expansion, they're adding a new class to play as, which is the Spiritborn. And the Spiritborn kind of plays, if you're familiar with the Diablo franchise, they kind of it feels like a hybrid of a witch doctor class from Diablo 3 mixed with a monk. Strongly leaning towards the monk class more so. But with that, they've expanded that class up a bit. And I want to talk about that in a second. But so they have the new class, and then they have a new story area with a new region and a series of just new quality of life additions, as well as a whole new kind of game element called the Dark Citadel. And this thing is pretty cool. It's essentially them bringing raids to Diablo.
Yeah, I saw that.
It's like typical Diablo fashion. For those that don't know, you're usually just running. It's an action RPG. You got in the isometric kind of third person view. You pick your character. You're seeing numbers go crazy. You're slaughtering waves and waves of the demons from hell in this game. And like what's the other game? Path of Exile is a similar game in the fashion of what this kind of genre is. And so these games, it's a lot of like you building out your power fantasy and making a character and just being an unstoppable force. I think, and whenever you're facing a boss, it's usually just like, hey, we gotta like, it's a bullet sponge. You just gotta like navigate it, build the optimal build and take it out. The Dark Citadel, I think, is a great direction to take this genre and take the Diablo series, because it very much feels like they're adding mechanics to things that require some coordination, that require more than just clicking at an ability or doing a rotation of abilities. It feels like, oh, the things that we've leaned on, maybe I feel like there's always been a parallel between World of Warcraft and Diablo. They're both online. One's more of an MMORPG where you're roaming, you're crafting. This one feels like you're going straight to like action all the time. I feel like that raid element kind of adds a layer to what Diablo can offer a player. And I've only lightly dabbled in it. I've tried it. I haven't done too much with it. It is cool. I feel like it's like the groundwork for what they could do again going forward. I definitely think people that play the DLC should be trying that. And one of the things that has deterred me, which is another element of this update that is like a DLC slash part of the quality of life updates, is matchmaking. Now you don't necessarily just like have to be like, hey, I know my friends. You can go into the game and be like, hey, I'm looking for a chill group just to grind this or that or whatever. And like, that's it. It's such a simple thing. I think like in many respects, matchmaking is like, oh, you think of an online game, you think of LFG and stuff, but finally they've been able to incorporate it here. And I think it's well missed and well placed in this type of game that it is. But yeah, that's what the Vessel of Hatred expansion is. I think the biggest thing that has impressed me is what they're doing with the class, the Spiritborn class. Mm-hmm. They have all the base classes in the base game. I always felt like builds with those prior classes. I was always like a rogue main or trying a little bit of a sorceress. There's usually like one or two routes you can really go that are viable, like as you're going beyond just like base playing, if you want to feel like you can play some of the upper echelons of the game. So to me, the Spiritborn is a great answer, because within the Spiritborn, they lean into 4 different creatures that are attributed to different styles of play. There's a gorilla, which leans into like heavy, slower, tankier fighting. A jaguar, which leans into fire, fierce, like quick slashing burn abilities. An eagle or a bird of some sort that is much more on the critical kind of precision attacking, and a centipede, which is leaning into poison type of builds. And you could lean hard into one, or you can combine up to 2, I believe. And I think that makes the class in itself feel like there's many subclasses. And I think if they apply that methodology going forward they've already been talking about like, oh, future DLC, we're looking to maybe incorporate more classes. There's talks of it, but nothing set. I would love to see them more fully flesh out a given class to feel as full of opportunity as that, rather than just saying, oh, you're a rogue, this is like the one way to really play optimally. Otherwise you're playing casually. I feel like that's always been a hard thing. It's like, well, I want to try a lot of different things with this one kind of character, but
is this something like, so for someone like me who played Diablo 4 at launch and then season 1 and 2 or whatever, is this something that you think would be enticing to bring folks back, or is this like a good starting point maybe for anyone who's never played Diablo 4?
I would say to both of those, the answer is yes. For the player that's been that was there at launch, so much has changed in the right direction. Quality of life updates they've been doing, that there's a methodology they've been fostering that I've listened to their team and their creative leadership talking about, which is time to fun. How quickly can we get you to the fun? And I played it at launch. It was okay. The campaign was cool. Then I put it down, and that was it. Kind of, I think, similar to you. I think a season or 2 ago, I was like, I want to get back into this. I never tried it, and that idea of the time to fun very much hit on my head, where I was immediately like, within the first few hours, I was already midway through leveling to the max level. And I'm like, oh, I can already start feeling my abilities fleshed out. Like I can really put all my points in all this stuff and feel like I'm a capable, powerful character, which is that's the power fantasy of Diablo. For the new player, yeah, it's great because, again, those quality of life updates, that you can go into that as your base, and there's the main campaign to still go through. It's a lot of fun. The DLC adds more to it, which is also something you can enjoy. There's a wealth of things to be able to enjoy in this,
Awesome.
from a seasonal type of playing, which from season to season, or from a just solo experience. Most of mine has been a solo experience. I've tried getting a few friends to play. And we've played a few rounds here and there, and I think it just makes it better when you have some folks to play with. But it is still fun as a solo player. I'll attest to that. It's one of those games where I'm like, I just want to put a podcast on or something like that, and I just want to see my character do some cool stuff and chill after a day out of work. Like that's the perfect vibe for me for Diablo right now, and where it's fit in this Halloween season. And so this DLC is really cool. I've enjoyed it.
Awesome. If you can give it a quick score out of 5, Diablo 4, that's what I try.
I would say this one's harder, and I just want to caveat that by saying, like, when they do a DLC, they're also doing the updates and the quality of life stuff. But as just purely their expansion, Vessel of Hatred, I would say it's a 4 out of 5. It's in that right direction. There's a few minor things that I'm like, oh, it'd be cool if they added some features here and there. But I think they're doing so much that it's hard to tell how much that, because with these ongoing games as a service, some things you're like, oh, immediately you're like, this feels good, right? I don't notice the difference.
That's why it's hard to score a game like this, because like maybe it's bad now, but give it 2-3 months, it'll be good again. Like, or
vice versa. Maybe it's good right now, and you're like, no, that really conflates the gameplay experience for long term. And so that's why I guess I'm reserving to 4, because I don't fully know how far that goes, and I haven't experienced some of the bigger features of it yet, besides the class and some of the new region and story.
Okay, I'm gonna just quickly go over the last one on my list, just in the spirit of spooky season, because we're going a little long. I don't want to have this show be too long. Retro Realms, Halloween Ash vs. Evil Dead. It's actually pretty cool. I didn't really know what to expect when I started. I know it's like a 2D platforming action game where you're just freaking slashing fools left and right. You can play as Michael Myers and you can play as Ash from the Evil Dead, and there's 2 like main arcade campaigns where you're playing through the story of Halloween, or then you're playing through the story of the Evil Dead. And then if you use Michael Myers, for example, in the Evil Dead game, there's like a narrative thing that's like, well, this is crazy. How'd you get here? Yeah. And then there's DLC characters. You can play as Laurie Strode from Halloween, which is...
No way. Okay.
Yeah. And then you can... I don't know who she is. There's another character from Evil Dead whose name is escaping me. It's fine. The platforming feels a little clunky. The combat animations and like when you slice a guy's head off, it looks really cool. It's very gory. It's exactly what you'd expect from these IPs. The music is awesome. The Halloween theme like is there, but it's like remixed in like a fun retro arcadey style. It's cool. Again, I just want to be quick with this one. I'm going to give this a 3 out of 5. It's definitely not bad, but it's not like blowing up my skirt either. You know?
Okay.
Do you have any intention to play this? Try it out.
It interested me as a concept because isn't it just like these are 2 different games by like I know Way Forward put together Retro Realms, but are the games both by Retro Realms or by Way Forward, or are the games by 2 different studios?
Yeah. So. That's something I'm also confused about, because when you look up the credits, like there's so many studios attached to it. I'm like, I don't really know what's going on. But Retro Realms, so I'm playing it on PS5. I got a code for both, but both games are in one.
See, that's the thing is the concept that was cool to me was like it's a platform almost for them to potentially put more like other franchises into like what if they put the Scream franchise?
Yes, exactly. So when you go to the Retro Realms menu, you get to walk around and like pick which game.
Okay.
There's other arcade cabinets there that are covered up with like a blanket, and so I could see them adding stuff in the future like Scream, like Child's Play, for, you know.
So, okay, on that front, that's my interest. I'm curious where they would go and what they add. If you could pick a cabinet to be added, what is the cabinet you would want to add to this?
My favorite, like, 80s horror is Nightmare on Elm Street. I think that vibe and like that kind of jokey atmosphere would fit perfectly in this world. Honestly, same thing with Scream.
Okay.
As well. Yeah, definitely.
Nice.
Cool. Okay, that wraps up our big reviews. I know there's still a ton of other games out. We did not get a code for Dragon Age, and if we are getting one, it's going to be late. There's so many other games that's just not out. I do want to ask you, of these games that we talked about, or I'm sorry, what else are you playing that's not on this list? Are you playing anything?
Oh, off this list? Mm-hmm. What I'm playing right now that's not on the list, there is one that I'll be putting a review out soon for. It's called Rogue Flights. I experienced this game Rogue Flight, singular. It is a Star Fox-esque like arcade shmup sort of game. So it is very Star Fox-like, where you're pilot of this super cool futuristic thing. It takes a lot of homages from like the 80s anime vibes of like Battlestar Yamato and many other Robotech and Macross and all those stuff in Gundam. It is so cool. Like it gives that old vibe, but also feels like it's cranking it up and giving it like a Western action like character vibe. You're playing as this main pilot girl, and she's got the best pilot. She's the best. She's the only pilot that's capable of handling things. And it's a small indie game, but like the music's great, the visuals are great, it plays smooth. I'm excited to like shed a lot more on it, but I'm playing that and Deadlock. I'm playing that with my brother and cousin a little bit. It's weird. It's very weird, but once you start getting the groove of it, it's fun. What about you? What do you play?
I'm curious about Deadlock as well. I've only heard great things about it. I didn't get an invite. I think
I can send you an invite.
That's what I thought. I'm just trying to find the time. The last 2 weeks, I've been playing all these games, trying to get ready for this podcast. For now, once we're done here, it's still relatively early. I'm going to try to finally start playing Metaphor, and that's going to be my whole personality for the next like month.
Nice.
And then what else am I playing? Am I playing anything else? That's pretty much it. I would like to try Vessel of Hatred. Everything is just based on time. I'm gonna have time. And then Dragon Age is out in like a week. I probably am not going to play that until like there's like a dead time in like a month or two.
And I'm really excited personally about next week. Well, maybe by the time this is out, it's already passed, but the Monster Hunter Wilds beta.
Yeah, okay, so that leads to my next like topic here. What are you looking forward to?
That. I'm 100% looking forward to Monster Hunter Wilds beta. I went to PAX West this year. That line for that game demo was the entire day for people. And so I was like, I'm good. I'm going to experience some other stuff, but I'm really excited to see it. It's crossplay, so that's really cool. It's going to be on all platforms, so I'm stoked to try out a few different weapons, just see what feels new. I miss the world of Monster Hunter, so
what's coming out like from now until the end of this year that you're really have your eye on?
I would say Dragon Age. I've always had an interest in that, and this is, I feel like, a good place. Like everything that I've been seeing preview wise has been interesting me with it. And the other one is probably Mario and Luigi Brothership. I love the Mario and Luigi franchise. It's so funny and so good and plays so well. And I've heard good things about like the team. They finally revealed like some of the folks that have been involved with the development of this game, and that excited me even more. Like
very excited. So
what about you?
Same thing for me. Dragon Age, I'm stoked for. I really don't know when I'm going to have the time to play it. Mario and Luigi, of course, very excited for that. I grew up on those games. I've played everyone. Not everyone is very good, but I'm really excited to see. It sucks that there's no more Alpha Dream, which is the original team who made the older games, but I believe the studio is called Acquire. They did Octopath Traveler and Triangle Strategy, I believe, so very good turn-based combat. I'm also really looking forward to Dragon Quest 3 HD 2D.
Yes.
Beautiful. Yeah. It's beautiful. And I'm really looking forward to I'm cautiously optimistic about Indiana Jones. I want it to be good because I love the IP. I love the character, but we'll see.
We'll see. We'll definitely see. We'll have to tag up again and see what you think about that.
Definitely. So before we go, what is one game you're looking forward to 2025 or even beyond? What's the one game?
Okay. If it's beyond, I have to say this. I'm going to put my clown mask on and stuff. Hollow Knight Silksong. Just give it to me, please, TJ.
That's awesome.
What about you?
So with my clown makeup as well, my most anticipated game of my entire life is Elder Scrolls 6. That game is also never coming out, but realistically, Ghost of Yotei, that's already my game of the year. I know Grand Theft Auto 6 should be out in 2025 as well, but Yotei, that's already number one for me. I cannot wait for that game.
Cool.
Awesome. All right. Well, that has been the Temple of Geek Podcast. Thank you everyone for listening. I know it's not really the typical thing. I'm trying to grow the video games site a bit, so hopefully this will help start that. So, where can everyone find you on social media, wherever?
You can find me everywhere at Cujo Prime.
That's it. Okay.
You can find me everywhere at Cujo Prime. I got my YouTube stuff with my own indie reviews on Temple of Geek. I'm writing all the time with Myles editing me. What about you?
Awesome. You can find me at Myles Obenza, Instagram and X/Twitter. I still use it for some reason. I don't really use anything else. You can find me on Temple of Geek all the time, primarily writing about games. Occasionally I'll do some like film and TV stuff. We do have a lot of live events coverage as well. We also have a Discord channel, so if you want to
hop in the Discord.
Yes, I will leave a link to it when we post this podcast. And then me and Kurosh, we both are going to the Game Awards this year, so if you see us there, say hi. I promise I won't be drunk.
I promise I will be dressed and not drunk.
Yep. That's it. Thank you everyone for being here, and we will see you next time.
Go on.